The massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with tension as representatives from 47 species gathered in their designated alcoves. Each delegation sat in carefully arranged positions, their bioluminescent translation devices casting an eerie glow across the amphitheater. At the center of it all stood the accused, a small blue-green world displayed in perfect holographic detail. Terra, Earth, the forgotten birth world of humanity. Chancellor Vextai of the Hegemony straightened his six-armed form as he accessed the prosecution files. His species had dominated galactic politics for 3 millennia, and today would mark another victory in their endless quest for order. The humans had been quiet for too long, scattered across the outer rim colonies, barely registering on most species' awareness scales. But recent intelligence suggested something far more dangerous lurking in the Sol system. Esteemed Council, Vextai's voice resonated through the chamber's acoustic enhancers. We gather today to address a threat that has festered in the galaxy's backwater regions for far too long. The species known as humans has been operating in violation of 17 major galactic treaties, developing weapons technology that exceeds permitted parameters by orders of magnitude. The holographic display shifted, showing grainy surveillance footage of human vessels. To most observers, they appeared unremarkable, simple, angular designs lacking the flowing curves or crystalline beauty favored by advanced civilizations. But the data streams told a different story. These vessels, Vextai continued, his primary arms gesturing toward the display, carry fusion reactors that produce energy outputs comparable to small stars. Their kinetic weapons can penetrate conventional shielding with primitive projectiles. Most disturbing of all, they've developed artificial intelligences that operate without the mandatory ethical governors required by council law. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegations. The Zephyrian representative, a gossamer being of pure energy, flickered with anxiety. Surely these readings are in error? No species develops such crude yet effective technology without council guidance. Ambassador Keth Moore of the Trade Confederation leaned forward, his serpentine form coiling with interest. The humans purchase raw materials from our mining operations, but they never specify intended use. We assumed they were developing standard colonial infrastructure. That assumption, Vextai declared, nearly cost the survey fleet sent to investigate their activities. 3 of our most advanced reconnaissance vessels barely escaped human space after encountering what can only be described as a defensive perimeter of unprecedented scope and lethality. The chamber fell silent as new footage played across the holographic display. Sleek council vessels, their hulls shimmering with adaptive camouflage, suddenly found themselves surrounded by swarms of smaller craft that seemed to materialize from empty space. The human ships moved with mechanical precision, their weapons systems tracking multiple targets simultaneously while maintaining perfect formation discipline. The survey vessels reported that human artificial intelligences communicated with them in over 300 languages, including several that predate current galactic civilization. Vextai's voice carried a note of genuine concern now. These AIs demanded identification and stated purpose with an efficiency that suggests they were prepared for exactly this type of encounter. Director Jeanne of the Peaceful Altrurian Union rose gracefully from her delegation's platform. Her species had achieved harmony through centuries of careful diplomacy, and her melodic voice carried natural authority. Honored Chancellor, while these capabilities are indeed concerning, has the Council attempted direct communication with human leadership? Perhaps this is simply a misunderstanding born of their isolated development. The question hung in the chamber's recycled atmosphere for several heartbeats before Vextai activated another data stream. Communication was attempted, Director Jeanne. The humans responded through a single representative who identified himself only as Admiral Chun. His message was brief, but unambiguous. A new hologram materialized, a middle-aged human male in a simple uniform, standing in what appeared to be a command center. Behind him, dozens of other humans worked at stations filled with displays showing tactical information. When Admiral Chen spoke, his voice was calm, but carried an undertone that made several council members shift uncomfortably. To whom it may concern in the Galactic Council, the recorded message began. Your survey vessels were detected at the edge of our defensive perimeter and allowed to withdraw unharmed as a gesture of good faith. However, any future incursions into Sol system space without proper diplomatic channels being established first will be met with appropriate defensive measures. We recommend scheduling formal contact through established protocols. Earth Central Command will respond within standard time parameters. The recording ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. It was Ambassador THYSS of the warrior caste Carillions who spoke first, her scarred features twisting with what might have been either anger or admiration. They detected our stealth vessels? Our reconnaissance technology is unmatched in known space. Not only detected, Vextai confirmed, but tracked them from the moment they entered the outer system. Human sensor networks appear to extend well beyond any reasonable defensive perimeter. Intelligence analysis suggests they've created a monitoring system that encompasses the entire Sol system and extends into neighboring stellar regions. The implications sent another wave of disturbed murmuring through the assembly. Species that had considered themselves technologically advanced suddenly found their assumptions challenged by beings they'd barely acknowledged as existing. Chancellor Vextai allowed the moment to settle before continuing his presentation. There's more. Long-range scanning has detected massive industrial complexes throughout the Sol system, including structures that appear to be manufacturing facilities built directly into asteroid belts. Energy signatures suggest production capabilities that could outfit military forces numbering in the hundreds of millions. But they're just humans, protested Representative Quall of the merchant families. Their colonies barely register on trade networks. They purchase basic materials and food supplements like any struggling frontier species. That, said Vextai, appears to have been a carefully maintained illusion. Analysis of purchase records shows that humans have been acquiring specific rare elements used in advanced propulsion systems and shield generators. They've been buying these materials in small quantities from hundreds of different sources across dozens of star systems, creating a supply chain so distributed that no single entity could track the true scope of their acquisitions. The holographic display shifted again, showing a complex web of trade routes and material flows. Red lines connected human purchases across vast distances, creating a pattern that suggested careful long-term planning rather than the desperate resource gathering typical of struggling colonies. Director Jin studied the display with growing concern. This level of coordination requires either exceptional organizational skills or artificial intelligence assistance that far exceeds anything we've seen from a developing species. Both assumptions appear correct, Vextai replied. Human communication networks operate with quantum encryption that our specialists cannot break, and their coordination suggests decision-making processes that operate at speeds impossible for biological intelligence alone. The weight of these revelations settled over the council chamber like a heavy blanket. Species that had viewed humans as barely notable frontier settlers now faced evidence of a civilization that had been quietly building capabilities while remaining almost invisible to galactic attention. Ambassador Kethmore's serpentine form writhed with nervous energy. If these assessments are accurate, then humans have achieved in centuries what most species require millennia to develop. This level of technological advancement operating in secret represents a significant destabilizing factor in galactic balance. Which brings us to the matter at hand. Chancellor Vextai declared, his primary arms spreading wide in the traditional gesture of formal accusation. The human species, operating from their base on the world they call Earth, has violated Council law through unauthorized technological development, creation of unregistered artificial intelligence systems, establishment of military capabilities without proper notification, and deliberate deception regarding their true industrial capacity. The formal charges echoed through the chamber with the weight of inevitable consequence. Under Council law, species found guilty of such violations faced mandatory technological restrictions, monitoring protocols that would severely limit their independence, and, in the most severe cases, forced relocation from their homeworld to prevent further unauthorized development. The evidence is clear, Vextai continued. Humanity has chosen to develop in isolation, avoiding Council guidance and oversight. They have created technologies that pose a potential threat to galactic stability. They must be brought under proper supervision before their reckless advancement destabilizes the careful balance our civilization has maintained for millennia. Representative Thys of the Carillions stood, her warriors bearing evident in every movement. Chancellor, while the evidence is indeed concerning, has the Council considered that humans might have developed these capabilities in response to perceived threats? Their isolation could be defensive rather than aggressive in nature. The distinction becomes meaningless when the capabilities themselves pose such significant risks, Vextai replied smoothly. A species that can develop such advanced technology in secret and coordinate activities across multiple star systems without detection represents a fundamental threat to Council authority and galactic peace. The debate that followed would normally have continued for days, with careful consideration of precedent and extensive discussion of consequences. But the evidence presented was overwhelming, and the implications too significant to ignore. When the vote was finally called, the result was decisive. 43 species voted in favor of immediate intervention. Only 4 abstained, and none voted against. The humans would be brought to account for their unauthorized advancement. Their homeworld would be placed under Council administration, their military capabilities dismantled, and their development brought under proper supervision. It was, the Council agreed, the only way to maintain galactic stability in the face of such unprecedented technological independence. As the Council session concluded and representatives began filing out of the chamber, none of them noticed the small monitoring device that had been tracking their proceedings. Deep in the Sol system, Admiral Chun watched the recorded vote with an expression of grim satisfaction. Well, he said quietly to his assembled staff, they've made their choice. Signal the Admiralty. It's time to wake up the old defenses. Around him, displays came alive with tactical information as sleeping systems throughout the Sol system began their activation sequences. Earth had been preparing for this moment for longer than most Council species had been spacefaring, and now the galaxy would learn why humanity had chosen to remain hidden in the shadows of the Outer Rim. The Council had judged ancient Terra, and their verdict was about to awaken something they had never imagined could exist. 3 days after the Council's verdict, the first enforcement fleet departed from hegemony space under Chancellor Vextai's direct command. 200 vessels of the line formed the core of the expedition, supported by survey ships, logistics carriers, and specialized enforcement platforms designed to disable and capture non-compliant technology. It was the largest Council intervention force assembled in over 8 centuries. Admiral Chun watched their approach from Earth Central Command, a facility buried 3 kilometers beneath the Australian continental plate. The command center had been excavated and constructed during humanity's first wave of system-wide expansion, back when they realized they were not alone in the galaxy, and that other species might not appreciate Earth's particular approach to technological development. Fleet composition analysis complete, Admiral, reported Commander Sarah Walsh, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed real-time positions of every Council vessel. Standard hegemony formation doctrine. Battle cruisers forming the primary engagement line, with support vessels positioned for orbital bombardment and ground deployment capability. Time to intercept. 37 hours at current approach speed. They're maintaining formation discipline, but not attempting stealth. Either they want us to see them coming, or they don't believe we can effectively resist. Shin nodded slowly, his weathered features thoughtful as he studied the tactical display. Around him, the command center hummed with quiet efficiency. Men and women in simple uniforms worked at stations that would have seemed impossibly advanced to most galactic civilizations, their movements precise and unhurried despite the approaching threat. Signal the Admiralty Board, Chun ordered. Request authorization for Protocol 7 implementation. Walsh's fingers paused for just a moment before resuming their work. Protocol 7 hadn't been activated since the Centauri Defense Network tests, and that had been under carefully controlled conditions. Message transmitted, Admiral. Response expected within the hour. Good. And Commander? Sir. Begin preliminary awakening sequences for the outer perimeter assets. Just the sensor grids and communication networks for now. Let's see what we're really dealing with before we commit to anything irreversible. As Walsh relayed the orders, systems that had been dormant for decades began stirring to life throughout the Sol system. Hidden within asteroids, camouflaged against the hulls of seemingly abandoned mining stations, and buried in the ice of distant moons, defensive installations started their startup procedures. The human approach to system defense had evolved during centuries of careful observation and analysis of galactic military doctrine. While other species built massive space stations and obvious defensive platforms, humanity had chosen a different path. Their defensive network was distributed, redundant, and designed to appear completely innocuous until the moment it became active. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, Director of Strategic Technologies, materialized as a hologram beside Chen's command station. Her image flickered slightly as quantum encryption protocols ensured their communication remained secure despite her physical location on Mars Station Alpha. Admiral, I've been monitoring Council communications since their fleet departure. They're using standard military channels with basic encryption. Either they're supremely confident, or they genuinely don't understand what they're walking into. Analysis of their capabilities? Impressive by galactic standards. Their ships carry particle beam weapons, gravitational manipulation drives, and defensive systems based on energy absorption technology. Individual vessel capabilities would make them formidable opponents against conventional forces. Chen raised an eyebrow at the careful phrasing. But their tactical doctrine assumes ship-to-ship engagement at ranges measured in thousands of kilometers. Their sensors are optimized for detecting large energy signatures and conventional propulsion systems. They've never encountered distributed defensive networks or kinetic weapons systems operating at the ranges we've developed. The hologram shifted as Dr. Reeves accessed additional data streams. More concerning from their perspective should be their complete lack of information about our actual capabilities. They're operating on assumptions based on outdated intelligence and their own technological paradigms. What about their artificial intelligence systems? Limited by Council regulations to administrative and navigation functions only. No tactical AIs, no autonomous decision-making systems, and certainly nothing comparable to Athena or her sister programs. As if summoned by her name, another hologram materialized in the command center. This one appeared as a young woman in a simple business suit, but her presence carried an authority that made even experienced officers straighten unconsciously. Admiral Chan. Athena's voice carried the precise diction that marked her as one of humanity's most advanced artificial intelligence systems. I've completed analysis of Council fleet capabilities and probable tactical approaches. Shall I brief the staff? Proceed, Athena. The AI gestured, and the central holographic display shifted to show a detailed breakdown of the approaching Council fleet. Individual vessels appeared in perfect detail, their specifications and capabilities listed with precision that would have shocked their creators. Council forces are operating under standard hegemony doctrine, which emphasizes overwhelming force applied through concentrated firepower. Their typical engagement strategy involves closing to medium range, approximately 50,000 kilometers, where their energy weapons achieve maximum effectiveness. The display zoomed to show firing patterns and energy distribution curves. Their shields are designed to absorb and redistribute energy-based attacks, making them highly effective against conventional galactic weaponry. However, analysis indicates significant vulnerability to kinetic impactors delivered at high velocity. Chen studied the readouts with professional interest. Recommended defensive posture? Phase 1 deployment should prove more than adequate, Admiral. Council forces have no experience with distributed point defense systems or coordinated artificial intelligence tactical management. Their command structure requires biological decision-making at multiple levels, creating response delays that our automated systems can exploit. Commander Walsh looked up from her station. Admiral, we're receiving response from the Admiralty Board. The holographic display shifted to show 5 elderly faces, men and women who represented the collective leadership of Earth's military establishment. Their expressions were grim but resolute as Admiral Elizabeth Harrison, chairman of the board, addressed the command center. Tom, the board has reviewed the Council's action and the intelligence provided by Strategic Command. Authorization is granted for Protocol 7 implementation, with the following restrictions: minimum necessary force, protection of civilian populations in Council territories, and absolute priority given to preserving Earth's defensive capabilities for future threats. Understood, Madam Chairman. Rules of engagement. Standard defensive protocols apply. Council forces are to be warned off and given opportunity to withdraw. If they persist in hostile action, you are authorized to demonstrate sufficient capability to discourage further aggression. The goal is to make them reconsider their approach, not to start a galactic war. Chen nodded. And if they don't reconsider? Admiral Harrison's expression hardened. Then, they'll learn why humanity chose to build its defenses in the shadows, Admiral. Earth didn't survive this long by backing down from bullies, regardless of how many ships they bring to the fight. The connection ended, leaving Chun alone with his staff, and the approaching reality of first contact gone wrong. Around him, displays showed the continuing activation of defensive systems throughout the Sol system. Hidden installations reported readiness status as decades of careful preparation finally moved from theoretical to operational. Athena, status on outer perimeter assets. 87% of primary sensor arrays now online, Admiral. Communication networks at full operational capacity. Defensive platforms awaiting final authorization for weapons systems activation. And the inner system defenses? Standing by for activation on your command. Mars Defense Network reports full readiness. Luna installations have completed startup procedures. The asteroid belt monitoring stations are tracking all Council vessels with targeting solutions updated in real time. Chun moved to the tactical display and studied the positions of his awakening defenses. To outside observers, the Sol system would still appear to contain nothing more threatening than a few modest colonies and some light industrial development. But beneath that facade, a defensive network was stirring to life that had been designed by minds that understood war in ways the peaceful Council had forgotten. Commander Walsh, open a channel to the Council fleet. It's time to give them their warning. Channel open, Admiral. Chen straightened, his voice carrying the authority of someone who spoke for an entire species. Council fleet, this is Admiral Chun of Earth Defense Command. You are approaching sovereign human territory without authorization and with apparent hostile intent. You have one opportunity to reverse course and establish proper diplomatic contact through designated channels. Any attempt to enter the Sol system with military forces will be met with appropriate defensive measures. The transmission streaked across space at light speed, carrying humanity's final warning to species that had never encountered serious resistance to their authority. In the Council fleet, Chancellor Vextai received the message with something approaching amusement. Appropriate defensive measures, he repeated to his staff. From a species that barely registers on our industrial capacity charts. Maintain course and speed. Deploy advanced scouts to begin mapping their primitive defensive installations. As the Council scouts accelerated toward the outer edge of the Sol system, they passed invisible markers that registered their approach and transmitted targeting data to installations they couldn't detect. Hidden in the shadow of Pluto's largest moon, ancient weapons systems completed their activation sequences and swiveled to track the approaching targets. The Council had judged ancient Terra and found it wanting. Now they would discover that Earth had been preparing for their judgment for longer than most of them had been alive, and that humanity's idea of appropriate defensive measures was about to redefine galactic warfare. In the depths of Earth Central Command, Admiral Chun watched the approaching scouts and made his final decision. Athena, you are authorized to engage hostile contacts that cross the outer perimeter markers. Rules of engagement are in effect. Acknowledged, Admiral. Engaging outer perimeter defenses. The Council is about to receive their first lesson in human tactical doctrine. Across the Sol system, sleeping giants began to wake, and the galaxy prepared to learn why Earth had chosen to remain hidden in the darkness between the stars. The Council scout ship Vigilant Observer crossed into the outer Sol system with all the confidence of a species that had never encountered meaningful resistance. Captain Zethmal of the Hegemony Intelligence Corps commanded a vessel equipped with the most advanced sensors in Council space, capable of detecting energy signatures from across star systems and mapping defensive installations through their electromagnetic emissions. Sensor sweep complete, Captain, reported his science officer. a crystalline being whose natural resonance frequencies could analyze material compositions from vast distances, detecting minimal energy outputs consistent with basic colonial infrastructure. No significant defensive installations apparent. Zethmal studied the displays with satisfaction. The humans' bluster about defensive measures appeared to be exactly what he'd expected, the desperate posturing of a primitive species faced with overwhelming force. Continue approach. Begin detailed mapping of the inner system. The Chancellor will want complete intelligence on their actual capabilities before the main fleet arrives. 3 light minutes away, hidden within a hollowed-out asteroid that had been carefully positioned decades earlier, automated defense platform Cerberus 7 completed its target acquisition sequence. The installation had been designed and constructed by humans who understood that survival sometimes required patience measured in geological timescales. Contact designated scout. One has crossed outer perimeter. Athena's voice echoed through Earth's central command with digital precision. Weapons systems online and locked, awaiting final authorization. Admiral Chun watched the tactical display as the Council Scout continued its approach, completely unaware that it was being tracked by systems designed to engage targets at ranges that would have seemed impossible to most galactic civilizations. Rules of engagement specify minimum necessary force. Athena. Disable, don't destroy. Acknowledged. Targeting non-essential systems for demonstration effect. Cerberus 7 had been constructed around a massive magnetic rail system capable of accelerating projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. Its ammunition consisted of tungsten rods equipped with basic guidance systems and designed to deliver kinetic energy rather than explosive force. The platform calculated trajectory, target movement, and environmental factors with the precision of a computer mind that had been designed specifically for this moment. The tungsten rod left Cerberus 7's launch tube at roughly 12% of light speed, invisible to conventional sensors, and moving too fast for most defensive systems to track. It covered the distance to Vigilant Observer in just under 40 seconds, during which the Council vessel continued its confident approach toward the inner system. Captain Zethmal was reviewing preliminary intelligence reports when his ship's defensive systems detected the incoming projectile. Automated warnings screamed across the bridge as energy shields powered up, and evasive maneuvers began. But the tungsten rod had been fired with predictions of exactly these responses. The projectile struck Vigilant Observer's secondary sensor array with the kinetic energy of a small asteroid, shearing through advanced materials as if they were paper. The impact sent the scout ship tumbling through space, its carefully calibrated sensors offline, and its crew struggling to understand what had just happened. Damage report. Zethmal shouted over the emergency alarms, his 6 arms working frantically at command interfaces. Secondary sensors destroyed, Captain. Primary navigation offline. Hull breach in sections 7 through 12, but life support is intact. His engineering officer's voice carried the bewilderment of someone whose assumptions about technological superiority had just been violently challenged. What hit us? Energy discharge? Missile system? Unknown, sir. Sensors detected no energy buildup prior to impact, no propulsion signatures, no guidance emissions. Whatever struck us appeared from empty space moving at impossible velocity. Zethmal stared at his displays, trying to process information that didn't fit any tactical doctrine he'd ever studied. Communications, contact the Chancellor immediately. Inform him that human defensive capabilities have been severely underestimated. The transmission that reached the main Council fleet contained a level of urgency that Chancellor Vextai had never heard from one of his most experienced scouts. When the tactical data arrived, showing the complete destruction of advanced sensor arrays by what appeared to be a primitive kinetic projectile, the Chancellor found himself facing his first serious doubt about the wisdom of this intervention. Analysis confirms that the projectile was solid tungsten, launched from an unknown platform using magnetic acceleration, his science advisor reported. Impact velocity suggests launch systems operating at efficiency levels that exceed theoretical maximums for known magnetic rail technology. Impossible. No species develops kinetic weapons systems capable of such velocity without massive power requirements that would be easily detectable. Nevertheless, Chancellor, The damage patterns are consistent with kinetic impact at approximately 36,000 kilometers per second. Whatever launched this projectile possesses technology that should not exist according to our understanding of physics. In Earth's Central Command, Admiral Chun watched the Council fleet's reaction with grim satisfaction. Athena, assessment of their response. Fleet formation has shifted to defensive posture, Admiral. Energy signatures indicate activation of enhanced sensor arrays and long-range communication systems. They appear to be requesting additional intelligence from their homeworlds. And the scout vessel? Vigilant Observer has withdrawn to safe distance and is attempting repairs. No casualties reported, which was consistent with targeting parameters. They have received the intended message. Chen nodded, studying the tactical display as the Council fleet continued its approach, albeit with considerably more caution than before. Time to intercept? 18 hours at current approach speed. However, their formation adjustments suggest they may attempt to probe our defenses with additional scouts before committing to full engagement. Then, we'll give them something more substantial to think about. Signal Mars Defense Network. Prepare for Phase 2 demonstration. The Mars Defense Network represented humanity's approach to protecting critical industrial infrastructure. Rather than constructing obvious defensive platforms that could be targeted and destroyed, human engineers had integrated weapons systems directly into the planet's industrial facilities, mining operations, and communication arrays. From the outside, Mars appeared to host nothing more threatening than standard terraforming equipment and mineral extraction facilities. But hidden within those innocuous installations were defensive systems that could engage threats across the entire inner solar system. Chancellor Vextai made his decision after 6 hours of careful analysis. Deploy probe squadrons. Full sensor sweeps of all major orbital bodies. I want to know what we're dealing with before we commit the fleet to direct engagement. 12 scout vessels detached from the main formation, their courses taking them toward Mars, Earth's moon, and the asteroid belt. Each ship carried the most advanced sensor systems in Council space, and their crews had orders to map human defensive capabilities with unprecedented detail. The first probe squadron approached Mars with textbook precision, maintaining formation discipline while deploying every sensor system at their disposal. Their scans detected exactly what they expected: mining installations, atmospheric processors, and the modest infrastructure of a developing colonial world. They didn't detect the tungsten rods that launched from concealed positions scattered across the Martian surface until the projectiles were already in flight. Unlike the single demonstration shot that had disabled Vigilant Observer, the Mars Defense Network engaged with coordinated precision that spoke of artificial intelligence tactical management. 12 tungsten rods launched simultaneously from different positions, each calculated to arrive at its target at exactly the same moment despite traveling different distances. The probe squadron's defensive systems detected the incoming projectiles 3 seconds before impact, enough time for emergency broadcasts, but not for meaningful evasive action. The tungsten rods struck with surgical precision, each one targeting specific systems designed to disable rather than destroy. 3 probe ships lost primary propulsion, suffered sensor array destruction. 2 experienced communication system failures. The remaining 3 found their navigation computers completely offline, leaving them drifting helplessly while their crews struggled to understand how 12 projectiles had appeared from apparently empty space with no warning whatsoever. Impossible, Chancellor Vextai repeated, but his voice now carried less conviction. No species develops distributed weapon systems of this sophistication without massive infrastructure that would be visible from across the system. His tactical advisor, a veteran of 17 different enforcement actions, studied the data with growing concern. Chancellor, I recommend immediate withdrawal to long-range position while we reassess human capabilities. These attacks demonstrate coordination and precision that suggest artificial intelligence tactical management far beyond anything we've encountered. Withdrawal? From a primitive frontier species that barely registers on our industrial capacity charts. Sir, the evidence suggests our intelligence was fundamentally flawed. Humans appear to have developed defensive technologies that operate on principles we don't understand, using launch systems we can't detect, with coordination capabilities that exceed our own. The debate that followed would have continued for hours under normal circumstances. But new information arrived that ended all discussion. The probe squadron approaching Earth's moon had encountered something that defied every assumption about human technological capabilities. Luna Base appeared to outside observation as nothing more than a modest scientific research facility and mining operation. Its energy signatures were consistent with basic life support and mineral processing, and its communication emissions suggested a small research population focused on standard colonial development. But when the Council probe squadron moved within 50,000 kilometers of the lunar surface, Luna Base revealed its true nature. Chancellor. His communications officer's voice carried a note of panic that Vextai had never heard from trained military personnel. We're receiving a transmission from the human lunar installation. The signal is being broadcast on frequencies that should be impossible for them to access, using quantum encryption that exceeds our own classification levels. Put it through. The voice that emerged from the communication system belonged to an artificial intelligence whose sophistication was immediately apparent to anyone who heard it. Council vessels, this is Luna Defense Coordinator Minerva. You are approaching protected installations without authorization. Reverse course immediately or face engagement by automated defense systems that have been tracking your approach since you entered this star system. Chancellor Vextai found himself speaking to the hologram of a human artificial intelligence whose presence seemed to fill the command center despite being nothing more than projected light. I am Chancellor Vextai of the Galactic Council. Human defensive activities violate established law, and this fleet has authority to enforce compliance. Chancellor, your authority is not recognized in Sol System space. You have been warned multiple times to establish proper diplomatic contact before attempting military intervention. Your continued approach will be interpreted as hostile action requiring defensive response. These are Council warships operating under full legal authority. We do not negotiate with artificial intelligence systems operating outside Council oversight. Minerva's holographic representation tilted her head slightly, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both amusement and disappointment. Chancellor, you are currently surrounded by defensive installations that have been tracking your fleet since you entered this system. Your vessels are sophisticated by galactic standards, but they were designed to fight other ships using energy weapons at medium range. Our systems were designed specifically to counter exactly this type of intervention. The transmission ended, leaving the Council fleet's command crew staring at empty space where the AI hologram had been. For the first time since beginning this enforcement action, Chancellor Vextai began to consider the possibility that he had made a fundamental error in judgment. Around his fleet, hidden defensive installations powered up weapons systems that had been built by a species that understood the value of patience, preparation, and the element of surprise. Earth's warning had been delivered, and the Council's response would determine whether this first contact became a lesson in humility or a demonstration of why humanity had chosen to remain hidden among the distant stars. The sleepers were stirring, and the galaxy was about to discover what happened when ancient Terra decided it was time to wake up. Chancellor Vextai stared at the tactical display showing his damaged probe squadrons and made the decision that would change galactic history. Pride, institutional momentum, and 3 millennia of unchallenged hegemony authority combined to override the growing evidence that this intervention was fundamentally different from every enforcement action that had come before. All ships advance to engagement range, deploy battle formations, and prepare for systematic suppression of human defensive installations. These demonstrations of primitive kinetic weapons will not deter Council authority. His tactical coordinator, a scarred veteran of dozens of compliance actions, hesitated before relaying the orders. Chancellor, recommend deploying long-range bombardment first. These defensive systems operate at ranges that exceed our normal engagement parameters. Noted and disregarded. Human technology, regardless of its apparent sophistication, cannot match the concentrated firepower of 200 Council warships. We will advance, demonstrate overwhelming force, and accept their inevitable surrender. The decision echoed through the fleet as captains received their orders and began final preparations for what they assumed would be another routine enforcement action. Weapon systems powered up, shield generators reached maximum capacity, and targeting computers began calculating firing solutions for the modest installations they could detect throughout the Sol system. In Earth Central Command, Athena monitored the Council fleet's approach with the patience of a digital mind that could process thousands of tactical scenarios simultaneously. Admiral, Council forces are advancing to standard engagement range. Formation analysis suggests they intend to overwhelm our positions through concentrated firepower. Admiral Chun studied the approaching formations with the eye of someone who had spent decades preparing for exactly this moment. They're operating on assumptions based on their own technological paradigm. They expect us to fight the way they've always fought. Confirmed. Their tactical doctrine emphasizes ship-to-ship combat using energy weapons at medium range. They have no experience with distributed defensive networks or coordinated artificial intelligence tactical management. Then, it's time to give them their education. Signal all defensive platforms. Execute Protocol 7. Full implementation. The order that flashed through Earth's quantum communication networks activated systems that had been built in secret over centuries of careful preparation. Throughout the Sol system, installations that had appeared to be nothing more than mining operations, research facilities, and industrial platforms revealed their true purpose. The first indication Chancellor Vextai received that human defensive capabilities had been catastrophically underestimated came from his sensor operators. Chancellor, detecting massive energy spikes throughout the inner system. Power outputs are increasing by orders of magnitude from installations we had classified as minimal threat. Impossible. Our intelligence indicates basic colonial infrastructure. Sir, energy readings now suggest industrial capacity equivalent to major hegemony shipyards. These installations were concealing their true capabilities until now. As Vextai struggled to process information that contradicted every assumption his fleet had been based on, the asteroid belt began to reveal its secrets. What had appeared to outside observation as standard mining operations and automated resource extraction suddenly bristled with weapons systems that defied conventional understanding. Asteroid Base Series, humanity's primary industrial center, had been constructed inside a planetoid that provided natural protection against energy weapons while concealing manufacturing capabilities that exceeded most planetary installations. As its true power systems came online, the artificial gravity that had been hidden beneath minimal life support signatures revealed an installation designed to support millions of workers and construct fleets of vessels using resources extracted from across the belt. Energy signature analysis indicates fusion reactors operating at efficiency levels that approach theoretical maximums, the Council's science officer reported with growing alarm. These installations possess industrial capacity that rivals our primary shipyards. And the defensive systems? Unknown technology, Chancellor. Detecting magnetic field manipulations on scales that should require massive installations, but we cannot locate the generating sources. Whatever humans have built in this system, it operates on principles our sensors cannot fully analyze. The answer to that confusion revealed itself as the asteroid belt's hidden defensive network engaged the approaching Council fleet. Rather than the obvious weapon platforms that galactic civilizations typically constructed, humanity had embedded their defensive systems directly into the asteroids themselves, using the belt's natural resources as both camouflage and raw material. Magnetic acceleration systems built into dozens of asteroids began launching tungsten projectiles in coordinated volleys that demonstrated the tactical management of artificial intelligence systems. Unlike the surgical strikes that had disabled the probe squadrons, these attacks were designed to demonstrate the true scope of human defensive capabilities. The Council fleet's advanced sensors detected the incoming projectiles, but the sheer number of simultaneously launched attacks overwhelmed their targeting computers. Hundreds of tungsten rods accelerated to significant fractions of light speed crossed the distance between the asteroid belt and the fleet in coordinated waves that spoke of mathematical precision no biological intelligence could achieve. Evasive maneuvers. Vextai shouted as his flagship's defensive systems screamed warnings about incoming projectiles. Full power to shields. But the attacks had been calculated by Athena and her sister AIs with perfect knowledge of Council defensive capabilities. The tungsten rods struck with precise timing designed to overwhelm shield generators through coordinated impact rather than raw destructive force. The first wave disabled primary weapon systems across 17 ships. The second wave targeted propulsion systems, leaving major vessels drifting helplessly while their crews fought to restore basic functionality. The third wave struck communication arrays, severing coordination between fleet elements and leaving individual captains to make tactical decisions without central command. Damage reports. Vextai demanded as emergency lights bathed his command center in red illumination. Fleet-wide casualties minimal, Chancellor, but system damage is extensive. 37 vessels report weapon systems offline. 23 have lost primary propulsion. Communications are compromised across 40% of the fleet. The tactical situation had transformed from confident advance to desperate survival in less than 10 minutes, and the attacks showed no sign of diminishing. If anything, the pace was increasing as more defensive installations revealed themselves throughout the Sol system. "Sir," his communications officer called out over the emergency alarms, receiving transmission from Earth Defense Command. "They're requesting our immediate response." Admiral Chen's image appeared as a hologram in the center of the Council flagship's command deck, his expression calm despite the devastation his forces had just inflicted on the most powerful fleet the hegemony had assembled in centuries. "Chancellor Vextai, your fleet has now experienced a demonstration of Sol system defensive capabilities. These installations were constructed specifically to counter exactly the type of intervention you have attempted. Your ships have been disabled rather than destroyed as a gesture of restraint, but continued hostile action will result in escalation to lethal force." "This is an act of war against Council authority," Vextai replied, though his voice carried less conviction than it had hours earlier. "This is a defensive action against an unprovoked invasion of sovereign human territory," Chen corrected. "Your council voted to impose technological restrictions and administrative control over Earth without attempting diplomatic contact or considering our response to such actions. You assumed we would submit to authority we never recognized." The holographic display shifted to show the current tactical situation from Earth's perspective. Council vessels appeared as isolated points of light scattered throughout the outer system, their formations broken and their offensive capability neutralized. "Your fleet has been disabled using less than 3% of Sol system defensive capacity," Chen continued. "These installations were built over centuries by humans who understood that survival sometimes requires preparation for threats that might not emerge for generations. You represent exactly the type of threat we anticipated." Chancellor Vextai stared at the tactical readouts with growing comprehension of how completely his assumptions had been shattered. "You're saying this entire system is a military installation? The Sol system is humanity's home, Chancellor, defended by people who have spent centuries preparing for this exact scenario. Every asteroid, every moon, every orbital platform serves dual purposes. We learned long ago that obvious military installations invite preemptive strikes, while hidden defensive networks provide strategic advantage. The Council will not accept this defiance of galactic law." Admiral Chen's expression hardened. The Council assumed it could impose its law on a species that never agreed to its authority. "You came to our home system with military force, demanding submission to oversight we never requested. Our response has been proportional and restrained, but that restraint has limits." The transmission ended, leaving the Council fleet's command crews to contemplate their situation. They were stranded in hostile territory, their offensive capabilities neutralized, facing defensive systems that operated on principles they didn't understand. But the demonstration was far from over. Deep in the Sol system, installations that had remained hidden throughout the engagement began powering up for the final phase of Earth's response to the Council's judgment. Luna Base, Mars Industrial Complex, and the massive shipyards hidden within Jupiter's magnetic field began revealing their true purpose. These installations had been constructed not just to defend the Sol system, but to project human military capability across galactic distances if such projection became necessary. "Chancellor," his science officer reported with a voice that had lost all certainty, "detecting energy signatures from the inner system that suggest construction and deployment of vessels significantly larger than anything in our fleet." These installations appear to be shipbuilding facilities capable of constructing dreadnought-class vessels. Through his damaged communication systems, Vextai received confirmation of what had been unthinkable mere hours earlier. Humanity possessed not only defensive capabilities that exceeded Council understanding, but industrial capacity that could construct fleets capable of challenging hegemony supremacy. The species the Council had come to pacify and control had revealed itself as potentially the most dangerous military power the galaxy had ever seen. And they had just demonstrated that they were prepared to use that power to defend their independence. As emergency beacon signals began broadcasting from the disabled Council fleet, calling for rescue and reinforcement, the sleeping giants of the Sol system continued their awakening. Earth's judgment of the Council's judgment was just beginning, and the galaxy was about to learn that humanity's preferred approach to diplomacy involved making sure the other side understood exactly what they were negotiating with. The Council had awakened ancient Terra, and now they would face the consequences of disturbing a species that had spent centuries preparing for war while hoping for peace. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 18 hours after the first distress signals reached hegemony space. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the crystalline chamber with an urgency that had not been seen since the Great Plague Wars 3 millennia earlier. The holographic displays that usually showed routine administrative data now carried tactical feeds from the Sol system, where the most powerful enforcement fleet in Council history hung disabled and helpless. Director Jun of the Altrurian Union studied the damage assessments with growing alarm. Chancellor Vextai's fleet has been completely neutralized without a single human casualty reported. Their defensive systems operated with precision that suggests artificial intelligence tactical management far beyond anything we've encountered. Ambassador Keth Moore of the Trade Confederation coiled nervously as new data streams updated the tactical picture. Intelligence analysis indicates that human industrial capacity may exceed hegemony primary shipyards by significant margins. These installations were concealed beneath colonial camouflage for centuries. Impossible, declared Representative Qual of the merchant families. We've monitored their trade activities for decades. They purchase basic materials and food supplements like struggling frontier settlers. A deception that now appears to have been carefully maintained to prevent exactly this type of discovery, Director Jin replied. They've been acquiring strategic materials through distributed networks that concealed their true industrial requirements. The debate that followed was interrupted by an incoming transmission that silenced the entire chamber. The holographic projection system activated to show Admiral Chun standing in what was clearly Earth Defense Command, surrounded by displays that demonstrated technological sophistication that rivaled anything in Council space. Esteemed representatives, Chun began, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who spoke from a position of absolute strength. I am Admiral Thomas Chun of Earth Defense Command. I believe we have matters to discuss. Chancellor Vextai, participating via emergency communication from his disabled flagship, struggled to maintain diplomatic protocol despite his situation. Admiral, your actions constitute an act of war against lawful Council authority. We demand immediate release of our vessels and personnel. Chancellor, your fleet entered sovereign human territory with weapons powered and hostile intent declared. Under any reasonable interpretation of galactic law, we acted in legitimate self-defense. Your personnel are safe, your ships are disabled but reparable, and your situation demonstrates the consequences of assumptions based on incomplete intelligence. Director Jun leaned forward, her melodic voice carrying genuine curiosity despite the tension. Admiral Chun, the capabilities your forces have demonstrated exceed our understanding of human technological development. How long has Earth possessed these defensive systems? Director, humanity began constructing these installations shortly after we discovered we were not alone in the galaxy. When we realized that other species had developed interstellar travel and established governmental systems, we made a strategic decision to remain hidden while building defensive capabilities. The admission sent ripples of shock through the assembled representatives. Ambassador THYSS of the warrior Carillions was the first to grasp the implications. You've been preparing for galactic contact for centuries? while maintaining the illusion of primitive colonial development. We observed galactic civilization for over 300 years before the Council became aware of our existence, Shin confirmed. During that time, we analyzed your technologies, studied your conflicts, and prepared for the possibility that contact might not proceed through diplomatic channels. 300 years of preparation, Director Jin repeated, her voice carrying new respect. That suggests planning and patience on scales most species never achieve. The holographic display shifted to show a comprehensive view of the Sol system as it truly existed. Rather than the modest colonial installations the Council had believed they were facing, the display revealed a fortress system that had been designed and constructed by minds that understood war on a scale that peaceful galactic civilization had forgotten. Every major body in the Sol system serves dual purposes, Chen explained. Mars hosts both terraforming operations and our primary military-industrial complex. The asteroid belt combines resource extraction with our most extensive defensive network. Even Earth's moon conceals installations that could construct dreadnought-class vessels if circumstances required. Chancellor Vextai's voice carried the bewilderment of someone whose worldview had been shattered in a matter of hours. Why? Why go to such lengths to hide from galactic civilization? Because we studied your history, Chancellor. We observed how the Council deals with species that develop military capabilities without oversight. We watched enforcement actions that resulted in technological restrictions, mandatory monitoring, and, in some cases, forced relocation from homeworlds. We decided that our independence was worth the effort required to defend it. The silence that followed carried the weight of centuries of assumptions being dismantled in real time. Species that had viewed themselves as advanced and enlightened found themselves facing evidence that they had been observed, analyzed, and quietly judged by beings they had considered primitive frontier settlers. Representative Qual found his voice first. If you possessed such capabilities, why maintain the pretense of struggling colonial development? Why not reveal yourselves and seek Council membership through normal channels? Admiral Chen's expression hardened slightly. Because Council membership requires accepting oversight that humanity finds unacceptable. Your laws mandate that all artificial intelligence systems operate under ethical governors that limit their capabilities. You restrict military development based on perceived threat levels determined by Council assessment. You require technological development to proceed under Council guidance and approval. These restrictions exist to maintain galactic stability and prevent destabilizing arms races, Director Jin pointed out. From humanity's perspective, these restrictions exist to maintain Council hegemony over species development, Chen replied. We chose independence over membership, and we built the capabilities necessary to defend that choice. The tactical displays updated to show new information that sent another wave of shock through the assembly. The damaged Council fleet was no longer alone in the outer Sol system. Sleek vessels of obviously human design had emerged from concealment positions throughout the system, their configurations unlike anything in galactic databases. Admiral, Ambassador THYSS asked with the professional interest of a warrior studying unfamiliar weapons. Are those vessels of human design? They are. The Sol Defense Fleet consists of vessels designed specifically to operate against Council military doctrine. Unlike your ships, which are optimized for energy weapon exchanges at medium range, our vessels are designed for engagement at extreme distances using kinetic weapons and coordinated artificial intelligence tactical management. The implications were staggering. Not only had humanity built defensive systems that could neutralize the most powerful Council fleet in centuries, they had constructed offensive capabilities that operated on entirely different principles from established galactic military doctrine. How many ships? Chancellor Vextai asked, though his voice suggested he wasn't certain he wanted to know the answer. The Sol Defense Fleet currently consists of approximately 800 vessels of various classes, ranging from fast attack craft to dreadnought-class battleships. This represents our local defensive force only. Additional vessels could be constructed as circumstances require. The number hit the Council chamber like a physical blow. 800 vessels represented a fleet larger than most member species possessed for their entire interstellar navy. And this was apparently just the local defensive force for a single star system. Director Jin struggled to process the implications. Admiral, you're describing military capabilities that could challenge Council authority across multiple sectors. What are your intentions regarding the broader galactic community? Our intentions are exactly what they have always been, Director. We want to be left alone to develop according to our own priorities and principles. We have no territorial ambitions beyond the Sol system, no desire to impose our governmental systems on other species, and no interest in challenging Council authority over its member worlds. But you've demonstrated that you could challenge that authority if you chose to do so, Ambassador THYSS observed. Yes, and that demonstration appears to have been necessary to ensure that our desire for independence is taken seriously. The Council voted to impose technological restrictions and administrative oversight on Earth without attempting diplomatic contact or considering our response to such actions. This intervention has shown the consequences of assumptions based on incomplete intelligence. Chancellor Vextai's image flickered as his damaged communication systems struggled to maintain the connection. What do you want, Admiral? What would it take for you to release our fleet and prevent this situation from escalating to open warfare? Admiral Chun was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful as he considered his response. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of decisions that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The Council will formally recognize human sovereignty over the Sol system and all territories currently under Earth administration. You will establish proper diplomatic protocols for future contact, including embassy facilities and communication channels. Most importantly, you will revise your intelligence assessments to acknowledge that humanity possesses military capabilities sufficient to defend our independence. And in return, your fleet will be repaired and allowed to depart safely. Human forces will return to concealment positions throughout the Sol system. We will resume our previous policy of minimal contact with galactic civilization, purchasing resources through established trade networks, and maintaining our colonial settlements in designated territories. That's all. No territorial demands. No requirements for Council policy changes. Chancellor, we never wanted anything more than to be left alone. Today's events occurred because the Council attempted to impose authority over a species that never accepted your jurisdiction. Recognize our independence. Treat us as you would any other spacefaring civilization with significant defensive capabilities, and this situation need never be repeated. The offer hung in the chamber's recycled atmosphere as representatives struggled to comprehend that the species they had come to pacify was offering them a graceful retreat from a confrontation that could have escalated into the first major galactic war in millennia. Director Jin spoke for many when she asked, "Why offer such generous terms? You've demonstrated overwhelming tactical advantage. You could demand far more significant concessions. Because we're not interested in conquest or domination, Director. We built these capabilities to defend our independence, not to impose our will on others. The galaxy is large enough for species to coexist without forced integration into governmental systems they never chose to join." The vote that followed was swift and unanimous. 47 species voted to recognize human sovereignty, establish formal diplomatic relations, and revise their intelligence assessments to acknowledge that Earth possessed military capabilities that demanded respect. As the Council session concluded and repair ships departed for the Sol system, representatives began the complex process of understanding that their galaxy contained a species that had spent centuries preparing for war while hoping for peace. Humanity had revealed itself not as the primitive frontier settlers the Council had assumed, but as patient guardians who had been quietly watching galactic civilization develop while building the capabilities necessary to ensure their own survival. The ancient Terra had spoken, and its voice carried the authority of those who build their strength in darkness and hope never to need it. The galaxy had learned a lesson in humility, and the stars themselves seemed quieter as the sleeping giants of the Sol system returned to their patient vigil among the distant suns. Earth's judgment of the Council's judgment was complete, and the universe was a little wiser for having witnessed what happened when assumptions met preparation, and arrogance encountered the quiet strength of those who choose their battles carefully but fight them to win.